properties? How
Correct.
does it? Okay.
Yep, you have your property line and you have access just for that.
Okay.
But that, we're also gonna include, like I said, medical, fire, utility easements, things like that. We wanna make it so above and beyond of what needs to be in the scope of that, but you cannot come into my property just because you have a mutual access easement now. So it's, we're trying to make it as bulletproof as possible, for, lawn and snow, for, like I said, medical, fire, police, anything like that, and any utility easement that needs to be addressed.
And currently that backside, or that, those are on the west, right? Because these
Yeah.
are the west side. There aren't fences. Those are open areas right
That is
now,
open
as
area.
we said. Okay.
And I've owned the places for 18 years. I never had an issue with a tenant or law or anything. So, I mean, he's just going up and beyond so there wouldn't ever be any future issues.
Well, and that's, I mean, somebody's gonna pull up a fence and then it'll
Oh,
be an issue. So
absolutely.
that's
Yep.
just,
And that's what we're trying to address.
Yep. Just be ahead of the curve on that.
Yeah. So that way someone's not down here trying to get something approved. We're like, no, that we're not gonna, because now you block off him and we don't have access.
I would suggest that you're as specific as you can be for city council because we're just not, well, I'll just talk about myself, not as well versed on this stuff as you guys are, so we really depend on what planning and zoning recommends.
So I understand why you're doing what you're doing, because we don't, like you said, you don't want mutual access because then anybody can access it, the
Yep.
public and everybody. My question for the city is, do we have any of these, like, letter type agreements that you're aware of? And does that create confusion when a property gets sold and if it's not on the official plat? Say 20 years down the road, I want to buy this property and that's not on the plat. If my lending company looks at the plat and they're like, no, we're not gonna let you sell this because you don't have access to the backyard, and this letter gets lost.
What I would recommend is just make it part of the attachment has to be part of the plat. And that's what I think Brian and John's goal is here.
and that's recorded at the county then.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
It is,
we want
okay.
this recorded at the county, so like your example, 20 years from now, or I want to know, let's say I am a tenant, and let's say I can't afford it now, but 2 years from now, I go to the new owner, Dan, and says, you know what, instead of renting, I've got enough money saved up, I want to buy now.
Okay.
So, yeah, we want this as an attachment and recorded with the plat. That's what Brian and John's goal is.
Okay, so it's a letter attached to the plat.
Yes,
not- okay,
correct. Yep,
Okay.
that is what we're trying to accomplish.
And what I've seen, mutual access agreement or an access agreement that's filed like that is very similar to an easement as far as lenders and stuff. So my concern is not having it done yet, and I don't know if we want to table it until it's done yet, or just in case there's a hiccup somewhere, and we don't want it to get missed, I guess, but I don't know if we want to table it until that's done, or if we're okay sending that on.
This is outside of my area of expertise, but Michael, I'll rely on your opinion on this one.
I don't want to extend things too far. My concern is not having it done because things do get missed, and then if this all goes forward and it's not done, it's a problem. So I guess I would rather table it till the next meeting.
Are you okay tabling it, Ron? I mean, we're not gonna get it addressed by the next
No,
council meeting, so
No.
we'll have one
If
more
that-
meeting before.
I totally understand where you're coming from, and I want to do it once and be right, just what you guys want. That's what I'm hearing, and so if it does get tabled, it just gets tabled. And then I got to get on some people's back ends and say, let's go. But, it was just bad timing with everything between John and Brian. And Brian knows exactly what he wants, John knows what he wants, but they've got to correlate. Because I don't have attorney behind my name or surveyor. So,
I would make a motion to table this to the next meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, we've got a motion and second to table until the next meeting, which would be when? February 6th, and then council could deal with it right after that on that next Monday. Right? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thanks for your patience, guys.
You
Appreciate
bet.
it.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, preliminary plans, Aspen Ridge.
Russ is back with some new ideas for Aspen Ridge. They are looking at a townhome concept south of where the apartments are being built, some fourplexes, some fiveplexes, private roads in the middle. They're looking for your approval of preliminary plans so they can continue on and get started.
Go ahead, just state your name and address, please.
Russell Atkins, 8304 South Timber Oak Circle, Sioux Falls. Patrick, that's a horrible site plan. Can you go down, keep going? Keep going. Another one. Oh, one more. This is why my engineering cost me so much. Keep going. There we go.
They charge you by the sheet, right?
Yeah. I'm thinking about them. They're charging me, right? So what we've got, excited to bring it to you guys. We've got 6.5 acres that we on R2 that we're looking at a site plan that would be 70. Although with the good news tonight with 5-foot side setback, we might get a couple more. But anyway, the current site plan's got 70 units. For townhomes, we've got 3 private roads, or actually access easements there, named after my wife and her 2 daughters. And we took your request on having them loaded on Christensen and Chestnut Boulevard, and right across the street from the park where the splash pad's going to be, the pickleball courts. So we're pretty excited about it. And we've talked about it enough. I don't want to bore you, so I'm more than happy to take questions or anything else that you may have.
Sorry, I might have missed it. What's going in along Folsom Place? Are those fourplexes?
So there is no actual executable plan for them yet, but what is represented here is the concept of twin home lots along a private road for that additional, I think that's 4.1 acres of land.
Okay.
There's conversations of something similar along that, but that's what we got shown for right now, which we felt was a pretty good use for it. We just don't have a buyer yet.
So,
And then, similar to the previous topic, so the places on Amy and Kalen Place, the middle lots, is there access to the rear yards on those?
Currently, we're not contemplating fences, but I get where that would be the case, and if so, then of course we would have an access easement, and once you record it against the title to the property, it comes up with any title search or anything else that you do, so it would run with the property. But in setting up an HOA, which would be a requirement for us here, we would have that as well as, snow removal and trash pickup and irrigation, and will be an HOA, yes. I sure don't want that headache.
And these units do have access through the house to the backyard, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, those other units the biggest part was that those didn't have even access through the house to the backyard. So that's what we were,
But it's still a valid concern, if you've got a common lawn maintenance
Yeah.
agreement and things of that nature.
so Russ, which one is your wife's street?
Amy Place would be my wife.
Okay, and the daughters?
Kellen, that's Irish,
Okay,
and Aiden, which is also Irish.
Okay, all right.
My business partner got his kids on the first set of streets, so I thought I better catch up.
So are we just looking at this? What do we have to do with this?
So you would have to approve the preliminary plans, and then the city council would have to do the same. Tammy will correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. You both have to approve, both groups.
Now, one thing that is one thing that's not depicted well here is the driveways are actually just the width of the garage door. So there will be a little bit of green space in between each driveway.
And that's required by the zoning code. Driveways be the width of the garage.
Russ, I was at Park Board last night, and I understand that there's a lot of good comments about the pickleball court, so thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so thank you.
Yes, yes, it's nice seeing that. Wait till we get the splash park in.
So question, if this is set up originally as an HOA, that'll address the snow removal, that'll address the access to the rear yards. Help me out, if the HOA was ever absolved, and these all become private, what happens as far as snow removal, and, or can that happen? Could the owners of an HOA ever agree to dissolve an HOA?
It's part of the entitlements.
Pardon
Right.
me?
I mean,
It's part of the entitlements. I don't think you can.
if you could somehow convince probably 100%, yes, but I think they'd be setting themselves up for a problem, because the city would not come in and plow their private street. So they would each have to contract for their portion of the private street. And if they didn't, then the city would fine them, of course. So it would be a lot of problems for them if they
You know,
not
as a
maintain.
developer that's concerned about this moving forward, I probably think we might put something into the CCNRs or something. I'll get with my lawyer. You know, I don't want to debunk HOA out there, with our name on it. So we'll probably put some teeth into whatever documents we need to, such that it's perpetual and has to run with the title of the property. I would assume that's probably something our lawyer already does, but I'm not
Sorry,
a-
we
I'm
don't
not a
have a lot of
lawyer.
HOAs in
Sure.
town, so, yeah.
Yeah,
Not
I'm more used to the HOAs from where I'm from, and a little bit more teeth in some of the documents, and I realize that it's a little less done here in South Dakota, so we'll find a happy medium.
So in process, so this plan depends on, right now in progress, the city council has their second reading on Tuesday, is the single family attached 5, up to 8 as a conditional use. So this does presume that'll go into effect. Right now, the first building is sought to be constructed as multifamily, and we're working through that process with Russ and DGR and everyone else. But so that's what it does presume, but so far we haven't heard anything contrary to that. But that's the process.
Heidbrink, I'll make a motion, to recommend approval to city council.
Right, this one is just an approval, right?
Yes,
For us.
both groups approve. So you can recommend, or you can just approve on your end. It does. It goes to both. You both have to approve it.
I'll make a recommendation to approve.
Okay, we've got a motion.
Shoneman, second.
Okay, Okay, motion and second to approve, whatever.
It's a motion to approve.
Motion to approve. All right, and then it goes to city council. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thanks, Russ. Okay, cell tower. I saw somebody back. He's behind the post. I couldn't see him back there. Okay,
So
here we go.
the big difference in front of you now, at the last meeting, you talked a bit about what we want the setback to be, whether it's from residential lots, the property line, is it from the setback inside the property line, is it from a habitable structure, is it from a residential structure? So what you have in front of you is put together by Tammy and our engineering department. The green areas are where a cell tower would be currently allowed, either permitted or conditional, usually industrial and commercial. And the circles are just all over the place to kind of give you a sense of what's 100 feet, what's 150 feet, and what's 200 feet. Yes, the big map with all the green, or some green. So right now, the site they are looking at is not green because it is NRC, and in NRC currently, if you have an existing tower or base station structure, you could add more equipment. You just could not put up a new tower. That's why it is not shown in green, but that is down at the corner of Maple and Park. So basically, either way you slice it, whether it's 100, 150, 200, that would go into the school-owned lot across the street. That would be residential.
That one hasn't been changed to institution.
It is not. And whether the school is up to that would be a conversation if you all wanted to have it with them. They have in the past. They have talked about. They know the process, and they know it's an option, and it probably benefits the school because it gives you more accessory buildings and signage and all sorts of things schools need. Generally, a school is not just one building with nothing else around it. So they have fields, and they have scoreboards, and they have stands, and all sorts of fun stuff, playgrounds.
So I think, at least for myself, looking at the map, I was struggling to kind of like make sense of it a little bit. Maybe makes more sense to you guys, but my primary takeaways is that there's not really any availability of zoning jurisdictions that currently allow for a cell phone tower, except for that little trapezoid over that's north of Huset's, which kind of like we talked about in the earliest meeting. I think that's purchased or recently been purchased by that whatever organization owns Huset's, and they are not interested in having a cell phone tower. So our hope is that we can either, add some other zoning, I'm not sure what you call them, districts, to permit towers. And we continue to feel like being right there tucked into a floodplain, where, at least 250 feet away from any habitable structure, house or building, that we just feel like makes the most sense. In my professional experience, there's more blowback on people trying to build towers in city parks than there would be in an area like this. But I understand the push for Aspen Park as a potentially viable area. We'd have to go back to Verizon and see if that meets their needs from a propagation standpoint. But yeah, I'm hopeful we can arrive at some sort of compromise that we are a couple hundred feet from a habitable structure. As I'm measuring it, where the tower would go is about 100 feet from the lot line from the school to the south. Probably worth survey or double checking that, but certainly not 300 feet, which is what the code currently indicates.
kind of the question for P and Z is, so what would you like the separation distance from something else for a cell tower to be, whether it's a property line, whether it's residential, commercial, whatever, generally residential is the concern. Would you want, like, where do you want the line to be, and what do you want the separation distance to be and measured from?
The other concern that I have still is we have to rezone it to something that it will fit in, because we don't want to put in an NRC. So one of the other zones that we've certainly discussed is putting in the institutional, and my concern is still that that would leave our neighborhood parks susceptible to a tower. I know that that wouldn't necessarily be probably anyone in this room's desire to put in a park, but given the demographics of Brandon, where we don't have a lot of commercial, and we are starting to get some commercial in our newer developments, but we don't have a lot of commercial, so I think our neighborhood parks could be susceptible to this, and that'd be my concern with the institutional, as far as what zone we would want to rezone to.
So you're saying you wouldn't want it in parks, is that what you're saying?
Right, I'm saying,
Okay.
and if we said we would allow an institutional without making a change that, so, whether there's a way we can subcategorize neighborhood parks in institutional, that they aren't as vulnerable to some of the other uses that are allowed in institutional. I don't know how difficult that is, or, I mean, we can kind of do whatever we want, I think, in a way, but I don't know how that works.
I think the city's already made a statement that they're not gonna allow towers on their properties, so. If it's a city-owned park, it's not gonna happen. If it's a city-owned water tower, it's not gonna happen. If it's a city-owned building, it's not gonna happen. But a neighborhood park doesn't necessarily have to be a public park. It could be part of an HOA. If the HOA has a park that's institutional, and the HOA agrees to do that, then I don't have a problem with that.
Just for anyone watching, the decision on what to use a park for comes down to the city council, whether they want to use it for that purpose. And I don't know if the city council has definitively made any statements on that or not. Barb seems to think they haven't. So I don't know if the door is completely slammed shut, but that's a city council decision on what they lease the parks for.
But you mentioned that there's a lot of blowback putting them in parks.
I just think that, I don't know that you're going to find that more people are like, yeah, put it in the park as opposed to put it over in the drainage area.
I guess part of my point is that if we allow towers in institutional and we have city parks in institutional, people are going to make that connection unless we make some kind of a separation. Not saying that you're trying to put towers in all of our parks. I'm not saying that, but there's going to be people that are going to read into that and say, well, you allow it. And so my point is, can we get ahead of it? Can we say that city parks are not as susceptible to some of the uses in institutional as other properties are? That's my point, I guess.
Because we had people come in just when we were trying to rezone the parks, worried about what was happening, right? Yeah, okay.
There's a variety of ways we could do it. We could subdivide classifications of parks. We could have neighborhood park, and we could have community park, and we can separate them by size. We could add so we have all those general requirements of the cell towers. We could have may not be located in a park less than X acres in size, or if that's the route you wanted to go, we could certainly try to think through some language to try to protect neighborhood parks more than Aspen Park or McCarty Park, or if you want to protect those
also within institutional are things like retention ponds, which I don't think anybody's gonna have heartburn about putting a cell tower in a retention pond area, so.
It would probably be where it is in relation to where the water would be.
Yeah, and I mean, typically retention ponds aren't the best places because they're typically in a low spot, but, you know, just because we say institutional doesn't mean that that's only parks. Institutional is a lot of things, so.
Well, in a lot of ways, I think institutional would be a good place for this, aside for the places in institutional where you don't want it. So that's my point. You know, I don't know that institutional is the wrong zone for this. I just, we have a lot of different things in institutional. I don't know that everything institutional would be right for a tower, I guess is my.
But the way it reads now, you would be too close to something at this point, right? Unless we make a change.
Correct. The setbacks currently read 300 feet
Okay.
from residential property line. I think. Is it lines or is it structures?
I think it's a residentially zoned or used property, and that would be measured from the property line.
Have you looked at any, on Split Rock Boulevard, east of Aspen Park, and so it'd be north of Huset's? You looked at that one property immediately north of Huset's, but along the river there, between the river and Split Rock, have you talked to any of the property owners there? It's just from a layman, it's higher elevation, it's
Sure.
away from houses. Is there?
So we actually submitted first a property to Verizon for their approval, which was on the east side of the river, just outside of city limits, owned by a gentleman named, I can't remember his first name, Thompson was his last name. The trouble with is in urban settings with such a short tower, 100 foot, generally what Verizon's looking for is either a quarter or a half-mile ring that it needs to fall within. And that's pretty limiting in terms of what structures meet that. So they rejected that site because it was too far east, because it didn't provide the coverage they needed in that circle. So, and then we can't go further south because I think, like I've mentioned previously, there's archaeological concerns from the tribes. And we even thought about, could we convince the city of Brandon to let us go in that drainage area? But the National Environmental, NEPA, you have to submit a tower through NEPA, I think that's the National Environmental Preservation Act, will not allow you to build a tower in a floodplain. So there's a lot of different hurdles there.
So let's just say we can't find a spot for it. What's going to happen to our? What's going to happen to our service? It's going to keep diminishing.
I just think as population increases, the burden on the two existing sites, the water tower, which sounds like maybe won't even be around for much longer as a communication site, and the existing tower will just be overburdened, and you won't be able to get the responsiveness and data as quick as you would maybe expect. Like I've mentioned before, I think Harrisburg has 4 communication sites. T has more than that, comparable populations. You guys currently are working off of 2. So you could tell me, better than I would know what your service looks like. I know I'm getting 1 bar here in the building. Maybe the walls are thick or something. But so it's just as the population grows, it's just going to be less and less reliable connectivity.
Well, I know the
Essentially,
mayor
so.
tonight said he only had 2 bars when he was at the meeting. So
I do know I've been paying a lot more attention to cell phone towers. I notice there's a lot around you don't even notice.
Yeah, once you think about them. And I would say so we're the third group. We're the first local group that's attempted this. The first 2 tower developers were not successful at finding a site, largely because of zoning limitations, and they just gave up on it. Because I'm from Sioux Falls and I can drive up here every 2 weeks in half an hour. It's a little bit of an easier sale. But if we get to a point where we just amicably agree it's not feasible, Verizon's next recourse is essentially just to file a lawsuit, which I don't know that the city wants. I don't know that they really want. They might just punt it down the road for a few years, but they would try to make a case with the FCC that it's effectively prohibited to build a tower in the area. Who knows what the outcome of that would be?
Which could end up being worse, where it would go possibly.
I don't think we're preventing anybody from coming in and buying a parcel of land from a private landowner and zoning it something to put a tower up. So I don't think anybody could sue us for that.
No, but that'd be if someone's willing to sell though too. I mean, it's
Right,
all,
but we as a city
No,
can't
I
force
know
people, we as a city can't force someone to sell their land. So, we as a city can create areas where we can put towers, which we have LIHI. I'm suggesting we allow it to also be added to institutional and general business. You know, so in my opinion, that's 4 districts right there that we're allowing. So I don't think we need to worry about being sued.
Well, but they could say, we have a willing seller, but because of your zoning rules, you are limiting where we can go. I think they could use that
The
argument.
problem is down south, there's nobody that wants to sell land.
I know, but
Look.
Alliance is willing to allow it. That's the issue, right? Alliance is willing to do it.
Correct.
But it's right next to residential, current residential, which makes it difficult, which we do have to protect those people, so.
We do, Brian, but if we, I mean, we would get nothing done if the neighborhood comes in and, you know, is upset. We've had that issue before. We just couldn't get anything done if we went by that all the time. Now, I think we have to have protections for them, yes, but I think we need to keep it reasonable too. Otherwise, we just can't get any development. If I said no to every time somebody came in and said it was going to impact their property values and et cetera, we wouldn't get anything done. So can we come up with a compromise, a zoning compromise, a distance compromise, so we don't keep chasing this gentleman out here on Thursday nights? Or is it just something you don't want to deal with at all and we just say no?
Well, I've already suggested that we allow it, not only where it's currently allowed in LI and HI, but also general business and institutional. But I'm not getting any support from the rest of the group up here. Now,
It is currently,
once we put that, then we can talk about how far from residential, but right now we keep going from where we're gonna allow it to how far from residential, back and forth, back and forth. In my mind, let's just say, where are we gonna allow it? And then what do we need to do to protect residential?
Good point. All right.
it is currently allowed in general business and central business, not neighborhood business. So LIHICB, GB. Correct.
I would be okay allowing it in institutional. That'd be okay with me.
That doesn't solve your problem though for that property because
We'd have to rezone to institutional, which I'll be back here requesting probably.
we have to zone it institutional, but you're only 100 feet from, you're just across the road from the school, which is residential. So
As I measure it, 42 yards. So 42 yards is 120 feet or something like that. So, you know, our argument, I guess, has been from a habitable structure. That's typically what we see in other zoning codes. I think this group has felt more strongly about it being from property line. You know, I think generally people are thinking about the fall zone of a tower. So if you're 300 feet away from a 120-foot tower, you're pretty far outside the fall zone. But that would be the compromise that would be functional for us from a habitable structure.
I've suggested a 1.1 factor. To me, the distance to a tower is meaningless. without the height of the tower. So to me, if a tower's 50 feet versus a 300-foot tower, that's a big difference. And previously I suggested a 1.1 distance, so you have a 100-foot tower, it's 110 feet from a residential property line.
I think that's reasonable.
But you're saying property line versus habitable structure, there's a difference, right? I don't know.
All of our other ordinances are to residential property.
Property line, okay.
Whether it's liquor stores, whatever it is, everything is to the property line. And here again, to put up a tower and then restrict what someone can do on their property, to me, is not proper. It's not the right thing. We shouldn't restrict what someone can do on their property that they already own. So if someone, wants to add on to their house and now they can't because somebody put a tower on someone else's property, I shouldn't be limited on my property because of what somebody else did on their property. Yeah.
Is that how
Yeah.
setbacks work? It goes the other way too, that you can't build a structure? Because like we've shown in previous meeting in Sioux Falls, you'll see buildings all surrounding a tower. I didn't realize that would limit the development of other parcels.
The way we would enforce it at the city level would be if you put in a tower, the residential structure could choose to build closer to the tower, but the tower could not build closer to the residential structure. So if after the fact, the residential structure wanted to build 10 feet away from the tower, I mean, that would be on them. We just wouldn't then allow, say, the tower, I guess cone down. We probably would not allow it to rebuild in that spot because then
I think Brian's example would be the properties just east of Split Rock there are acreages now, and they're set quite a ways back, but they may not be acreages forever, and they may be changed to higher density residential. And even though you could build up to it, having a 100-foot tower too close would impact that property. I mean, if the house is set off 200 feet from the street, if you're saying to the habitable structure, you could build right up to the property line almost, and then you have a property with a tower right there, that even though they could build up to it, it would still impact that property, having a 100-foot tower that close. So that's what we're talking about versus habitable structure versus setback.
if I own a piece of property and I want to build up to my setbacks, I should be allowed to do that. If someone else puts up a structure on the adjacent property or two properties down the road, and then that limits me to, well, now I can't build up to my setbacks. That, to me, I don't think we should allow that to happen.
But what I'm hearing Patrick say is that would not happen. Am I not hearing that correctly?
that is how just spitballing it, not 100% sure, but that is how Paul and I would look at things. You would still have all the rights to build on your property, whether that would diminish your ability to want to do so because you'd be that close. You certainly could. If the cell tower could not build a new, if it somehow went away and wanted to come back, it could not, because that separation would be in effect. But the residents could build into that distance.
But then what happens if somebody builds into that and then the cell tower wants to do improvements on their tower, they can't because, you can leave what you have, but you can't modify it.
So there are certain expansion
To me, it's a lot
allowances
clearer
from
if
the
it's,
feds.
if it's to the property line. Then we don't have all of these gray areas to deal with down the road.
The only property line that I guess is at issue with the site we've selected is to the south. To the east, we're about 275 feet away from the east property line owned by, it looks like Jolene and Thomas Kujwa. And to the west, we're quite a ways, 300 feet plus from the Arrow Ridge development there. Looks like some sort of multifamily. So in this case, it's the concern about falling into, the proximity to the property line of the school, which the school is way set back. from the property line, but I don't know. I don't know if that makes any impact on the way people feel about it or not, but. Would it be from the tower or from our property line to their property line? Because we're building a tower over east of or west of that building that Alliance owns.
So right now, roughly on page 101 of the ordinance, it is all new facilities shall be set back at least 300 feet from a residentially zoned or used property as measured from the base of the facility, including accessory equipment if you have a building or anything. To
Okay, the
property
facility.
line.
I gotcha. Yeah.
So it would be from your base to the residential property line.
Understood. So it'd be tight for us. We'd probably have to reduce the height of the tower a little bit. But if the best compromise we could come up with was 1.1 times the height of the tower to an adjacent residential property line, we could probably build like maybe a 90-foot tower or something like that. I hope that would accommodate Verizon's needs. It's probably pretty limiting for future towers, but I don't know. As much as we want to support the being able to place towers in Brandon in the future. I think what I'm hearing from this commission is it's limited as much as we can, so I respect that.
The workaround there in that situation would be convincing the school to rezone to something not residential. Then that would eliminate that issue.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One of your biggest hurdles in that area is just that it's all residential.
Right.
Like south of Casey's, it's just a pocket of houses, and that's the zone that we protect the most. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But it just, as far as land
Hard
use,
time how Sioux Falls can allow this, and we can't allow one. That's my struggle the most. Because I looked through these old notes that we had from December 19th in the pictures from towers taken and how far they are from distances. And there's one that's, 15 feet away from a building. And then another one for, I don't know what it's zoned, but it looks like townhouses. It's 90 feet from an occupied structure. That's not the property line. I just have a hard time how Sioux Falls can allow it, and we can't really allow anything. I know we're trying to protect people. I don't know. I just have a hard time not allowing anything and giving it such a, we're pretty much allowing it to one spot in this town, except north, but the problem is we don't need it north. We need it where the residential is.
And I know people come in and say, we don't want that close to our house. We don't want it in the park. But if we discourage it and we don't have service and the residents of the town start having trouble with their service, they will also come in and say, we don't have service, you got to do something so we can have internet, and I can't make a phone call. So there's that too.
Yeah, there's really no reason a city like Brandon shouldn't have 4 bars of coverage across the whole city. At least, with the coverage and connectivity expectations of most urban areas at this point. And that's what Verizon's ultimately trying to accomplish here.
Well, Brian's compromise of the 1.1 is certainly a lot less than the 300, correct? Am I thinking that right?
As long as you're building a short tower, yeah.
Just one example here. I don't know if you gave us this example from December 19th. It's a 165-foot tower. The lot line is 25 feet away. Occupied structure is approximately 90 feet away, and it looks like it's R2 to me because it's a bunch of parking for. It's an R2 or an R3.
You build
It's not-
shorter towers and you need more of them. So it's kind of just, you got to make the call. Do you want one 150-foot tower or do you want 2 80-foot towers? Because they just don't cover as far based on height. So that's the limitation of a shorter tower. But I think in this case, Verizon's wish was 120 feet. You know, if we'd go back to them and say, well, best we can do is 90, we just have to have that conversation and see if that would work.
On the west side or the east side? Yep.
North of Huset's is what you're saying? That's currently NRC land as well,
That's
if I'm understanding right.
Yes. It's owned by Huset's. They do have some desire to develop in 5 to 10 years.
What we were told is that there's like, they're putting in some campgrounds and maybe a corporate facility for Huset's, but I don't know what's going over on that west property. You guys might know better than me.
So if he went back to Verizon and talked about a 90-foot tower, how do we, and they were agreeable to that, how do we feel about that? So he's not just chasing his tail.
It seems that we'd be back here discussing the same thing again sooner rather than later. Because we need more towers if they're shorter, if I understood you right.
Correct. You build this 120 footer, if you can get comfortable with it, I won't be back here for a tower on the south side for quite a while. Unless you guys explode in growth, which I guess I'm not counting that out.
Have you spoken with Dr. Larson in the school district on the zoning of the lot?
I haven't, no.
Would you like an introduction?
Yeah.
I can make one for you if you'd like to speak with them.
I'd be open to that. Ultimately, our hope is to be able to get to a place where we can build this tower in 2025. So feels like there's a lot of hurdles between us and being able to do that. But, we're going to keep pushing, doing the best we can. So if we need to rezone the property we're on and the property to the south, then we got to get the zoning code rewritten. I don't know. Maybe I'm conservatively forecasting 6 months or something like that. Maybe it takes longer than that.
I think generally we're in agreement that we need to add institutional, and so it's already in general business and central business. So really institutional is the only zone that we're really discussing adding it to. And then we need to clarify how far we want to go from residential.
Yep. Whether it's to the lot line, to habitable structure, to setback, but it sounds like property line is kind of the
I'm
way
leaning towards property line. 1.1, and I don't know what if we're in agreement, which I'm not sure that we're all in agreement, but if we kind of get some direction here, 1.1 to the property line, add institutional, and set some kind of a guideline for neighborhood parks. If you wanted to say parks under 5 acres, I'm just kind of spitballing here, but I think we're probably getting close to something here. And then once we have something, then it's kind of their job to find that property that works, or the tower that works, or whatever. But I think we need to define what works for us, and they need to find what works for them.
Yeah, I think that's a good path to consider. I think we recognize that 300-foot limit is probably overly intrusive or, that's not the right word, but anyway, and then, yeah, we've talked in a lot of different cases how we can't necessarily design something for one use just because it's present and, but if we can do something to improve it, we can also, once we have a structure, we can revisit numbers and stuff too, once we have a structure, so if we wanted to tweak it a little bit, that could come back up.
And if you're able to look along Highway 11, just east of Highway 11, so between the river and Highway 11, there's some land there that to me doesn't seem real buildable for a lot of things. It's higher ground. To me, it looks like it would work better for a tower anyway. The property you're looking at, it's such a small parcel that it doesn't give you very much leeway for setbacks. So that might be, I don't know if there's other areas that you can look, but that has.
Yeah, we have explored quite a few areas. This definitely wasn't the first one, wasn't our first choice. But, you know, we can continue to try. You know, just to get to this point, to determine the viability of the site, and to do the RF studies, and to engineer a design that we could share with you guys. There's been probably a $15,000 investment. Now that's our risk, so I'm not, you know, not blaming you guys for that, but it's not a trivial thing for us to redesign. So, of course, that's why we're advocating for where we have it, but that's just kind of the way things work with towers.
Quick question for you all. In addition to the setback from residential, do you care about an on-the-lot setback itself? 25 feet from its own property line, or 5, or don't you care? Or I'm just tightening things up. It would by default, unless you wanted to set something different. If it was the district required a 25-foot setback on the side yard, then that would be the default, unless you wanted something different. If it was 5, then it would be 5. We do set different setbacks sometimes for different uses. I'm just tightening things up so when we present a draft that we don't have minor issues to still work through. We can talk through a draft.
So you're talking,
And central, correct. Correct. It would qualify as the general for the use. I just wanted to make sure you didn't want some kind of special on the lot setback that would be different.
Oh, I thought I did. If you say the tower has to be whatever, 1 point, however many, away from its own lot line. From a residential lot. Oh, okay. So then conceivably you could put it close to your own lot line.
So if it's in the middle of an industrial district, you can put it.
HI is 10 on the side and 10 in the rear, and 25, I think, in the front. So
Well-
in HI, conceptually right now, you could put it 10 feet off the side yard. I just wanted to make sure that is,
Whatever we decide, I hope that the tower on the north side of town would be okay and that wouldn't be non-conforming.
Yep.
I think we kind of wrote this off, but it sounds like the commission wouldn't be excited about just rezoning this parcel to industrial, because you don't want an industrial lot in the middle of otherwise residential area. Am I understanding that correct? Because then you could save yourself all the talk about the other institutional stuff.
Yeah, the problem that because I mentioned that, and they kind of said, well, the problem with that is if this tower falls through, then we have an industrial lot, that anything that fits in that zone could be built there. We don't really want anything that can be an industrial built right in that area, so.
Understood.
Consider adding institutional by conditional use. And that would address your concerns, Michael, about putting them in public parks.
What's the minimum lot size for institutional?
I want to say it's probably an acre, so that'll need to be adjusted as well. Just because we do have even, a lot of our neighborhood parks are smaller than an acre. So that number itself is something to reevaluate. Just because we don't want even our own stuff to be out of compliance. So whether you want a minimum lot size on institutional or not, for some things it makes sense. For other things, like, I don't know if we had just a lift station somewhere, it probably doesn't make sense to require a whole acre. But
Maybe by conditional use or something, I don't know. If we wanna, I don't know. We don't really like, I don't like conditional uses if we can avoid it, but.
cell towers are a process anyway that would be akin to a conditional use. They've started the process, so it's an application. They have to meet certain requirements on what's submitted, then it goes to you all anyway. So to make a determination, so it's basically the conditional use process anyway.
That new pump station up in I-90 Plazas, or I shouldn't say new, the one that got moved, is 0.12 acres. So
We do have institutional things that would be smaller than that. So I don't know if that's long-term conversation. Do we care if institutional has a minimum lot size?
I see there's a green circle here right where my brother lives. We could talk to him. No? Oh, okay.
I did notice as I was looking at the zoning that there's groomers something or another. They're light industrial, kind of right in the middle of a residential. Maybe they were there before the house was built up around
They
them
were.
or
That's
something.
the original Brandon Industrial Park.
Oh, okay. So they probably wouldn't get away with that today.
That was once the edge of town.
Okay, do you have enough, Patrick, or what do you think?
I think so. We will. It be pretty similar to what we talked about. We'll add it to institutional. We'll see what we can talk through on park protection. We will have it be 1.1 times its height from a residential lot line. We'd probably make sure it is a residentially zoned parcel, because residentially used is interpretive if it's being used residentially or not. So residentially zoned, 1.1 times the height from that. The separation distance on the lot itself setback will be the district it's in, the default. So, and we can try to set up a conversation with the school if you'd like to talk to the school district.
And we'll need to, while we're doing this, we should address the size of institutional, because that's not gonna work for this lot.
I think this lot is smaller than an
Yeah.
acre.
Yeah.
And a lot of our neighborhood parks are smaller than an acre. I know Stone Ridge up there, I think it's smaller, and we have the other one on the east side of town. Sunrise is quite a bit smaller than an acre. So, Tallgrass might be bigger than an acre. It's a pretty good sized park.
yeah, the one out like Van Busker's Park, that's like 10 acres. Just so you're aware, like neighborhood, if you want to go down to protect those, you're talking acreages. That's like 10 acres out there in the bluffs for that park.
That's that big?
Because it's a drainage too.
It must
so
fall all the way.
It's a drainage, so it's part of it. Probably get bigger because that new development's going to be a drainage, the same thing. I don't know how that'll work.
So I have a quick question just to throw out is why, we talked about this before, but the NRC about not wanting to add anything to that, which in a general sense I would agree with, but in a case like this, why wouldn't we consider possibly adding this to NRC? I don't think it's the kind of change that's gonna make someone want to attempt to rezone something NRC, which I guess we can't prohibit them from asking. since it exists.
I think it was because the default when somebody gets annexed is NRC.
Yeah.
So then,
Yeah.
I think that's why, but maybe
Yeah.
to rethink it, maybe, I don't know.
Because if it would open up a property, I mean, I don't foresee anything else that I would think of adding to this zone, since it's designed to be something that we don't really use. It's designed as a catch-all for things that come in, but I don't personally see why we couldn't consider in this case adding it to things that are, so that it would be available to things that are already NRC.
The problem would be is if someone comes here and says they want to be annexed, and we put it in NRC, and our intent is not to allow certain things, like towers in different places or whatever. If we allow too many things in there, then where do we put property that's being annexed that isn't ready to be rezoned if we don't want those things? You know, I mean, if we allow towers or certain things into NRC, if we don't want a tower in a certain area for whatever reason, where would we put that annexed property?
Does that still functionally happen if something was annexed? Haven't we had, does that happen and then?
It can be simultaneously rezoned. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it defaults in as NRC and then it's rezoned later once they figure out its use. So you could have a situation where, you know, someone, oh yeah, they want to be part of the city, they bring it as, it's NRC. A lot of farmland comes in as NRC, then it's turned into something else once they go through the subdivision process and everything, but it starts out as NRC. And in that situation, it might actually be advantageous, because then you wouldn't have houses around it, and then you could put up the tower first. But there are situations where you just wouldn't want it to, you know, just sit there, and now all of a sudden it's just, they can do what they want, necessarily, not according to a plan, but.
I'd rather see them, if they want to put a tower in somewhere and it's annexed, then have them bring it in and rezone it into a zone that we allow for a tower, rather than have it into a default zone and they just kind of get in there before it's zoned what we were thinking or something, you know, so.
Okay, do we have anything else to add to the discussion tonight?
So just an FYI, our setback for a wind energy conservation tower is 1.1 from the property it's on. So this is a lot more lenient than what we spent, I don't know how many meetings going through on the wind energy conservation towers. We did.
Probably a lot less motivation to build a wind turbine in town. There's no real advantage to that, but
So for the next meeting on the February 6th, we should have a draft to discuss, and we'll, if it looks good, then we'll go through the public hearing process, or we can continue to hammer it out, but you'll have a draft review on the 6th.
thank you so
And
much.
maybe we could move him farther up on the agenda so he doesn't always have to wait until the end.
And that's hard when it's a discussion item
Yeah, I
versus
know, I'm sorry about that. You get to
That's
hear all
okay.
the other stuff, so thank you for
No
your
problem.
patience,
Yep.
appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Okay, do we have anything else for the good of the group?
We have to celebrate Paul and the building permits.
Yes,
No.
all right.
2024 was a good year. I want to say, and Rob certainly contributed, so we appreciate Rob.
I think Michael had it. 23 or 24.
It was last, no. It was 23. Yeah. I took last year off.
So I want to say it was 48 single family, 151 total multifamily over a variety of permits, and for a total valuation of 48 million-ish. I guess on this one it's 75. Yeah, yeah, and you know, valuation, you know, it is what it is. You can value things differently, but went from 48 million in 2023 to 75-ish 2024. So yeah, added quite a bit of housing. Now we just need people to get in there and yeah.
And our whole staff is, things are going good.
Okay, I will entertain a motion. Patrick said that this was gonna be a short meeting.
I'm always hopeful.
Totes so moved.
So it averages out. So we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Totes so moved.
We are adjourned at 8:27.